The October wind cut through Willow Creek Cemetery like a knife, freezing the air around the open grave where my father's casket hung suspended over the freshly turned earth. 47 pairs of eyes from family, neighbors, and longtime customers of Bennett Family Supply stared in stunned silence as Victoria stepped forward in her perfectly tailored black coat, blonde hair immaculate despite the drizzle. Her voice rang out sharp and clear, slicing through the quiet prayers. Everyone needs to hear this before we lay Thomas to rest. Lauren here. She's not his biological daughter. The words landed like a slap. My knees buckled. I gripped the yellow rose I'd brought, Dad's favorite. The ones he grew in the backyard every spring, hard enough that thorns pricked my palm. Aunt Clara gasped audibly behind me. Cousin Tyler's hand tightened on my elbow like an anchor in a storm. The funeral director froze mid-sentence, his scripted words dying on his lips. Victoria smiled that cold, triumphant smile I'd seen glimpses of for years. She pulled a folder from under her coat, waving it like evidence in a courtroom drama. I have the records right here. Thomas was O negative. Lauren is AB positive. It's impossible for him to be her father. She's been living a lie for 31 years. And it's time the truth came out about his real legacy, his stores, his money. Everything belongs to his actual blood. To Brandon. My stepbrother stood beside her. 6'2" of smug entitlement in an expensive wool suit, smirking down at me. Sorry, sis. Guess the family business isn't yours after all. The gasps rippled outward. Someone dropped a prayer book that clattered against a headstone. The world spun. 3 days earlier, we'd been planning hymns and casseroles, choosing the readings Dad would have loved. Victoria had played the grieving widow flawlessly, designer grief draped over her like couture, checking her watch during visitations, clutching that folder like a weapon. I should have known. The calculating glances whenever anyone mentioned Dad's will or the 3 hardware stores he'd built from Grandpa's single location in downtown Willow Creek, Ohio. But grief clouds everything. I wanted to believe she wouldn't stoop this low. Not at his funeral. Not with his body still warm in the ground. I was wrong. You're lying, I whispered, my voice sounding distant, detached. Victoria's smile widened. Medical records don't lie. Sweetheart. This girl has been pretending for decades while Thomas poured everything into her. The stores. The house. The legacy. It's all going to Brandon now. I've already spoken to the attorneys. The ground felt unsteady beneath my black heels. Dad had taught me to ride my bike right there in the driveway of our old Victorian, his strong hands steadying the seat while his work boots pounded the pavement in rhythm. I've got you, Lauren. I'll never let you fall. He'd built Bennett Family Supply from one dusty shop into 3 thriving locations across the county, teaching me inventory on Saturday mornings, introducing me proudly. This is my daughter Lauren. She's going to make a real difference as a teacher someday. Now Victoria and Brandon stood at his grave erasing me with a folder and blood types. Aunt Clara's voice cracked through the tension. At his funeral? Have you no decency? Victoria? I'm simply telling the truth everyone deserves to know, Victoria replied in that honeyed tone she'd perfected over 8 years of marriage to Dad. Thomas's real heir is Brandon. That's when Mr. Harlan Ellis cleared his throat from beside the ancient oak tree. Dad's lawyer and closest friend for over 25 years. Gray-suited and composed despite the chill. He'd attended every milestone, my college graduation, my first parent-teacher conferences as a 3rd-grade teacher at Willow Creek Elementary. He carried a briefcase like it held the weight of secrets. Mrs. Bennett, he said, his deep voice cutting through the chaos with quiet authority. Before you continue this display, you should know Thomas left specific instructions for precisely this moment. Victoria's smile faltered just a fraction. What are you talking about, Mr. Ellis stepped forward deliberately. 6 months ago, Thomas came to my office with sealed documents and very clear directives. He said, and I quote, "If Victoria ever tries to publicly claim Lauren isn't my daughter after I'm gone, open this immediately and play the recording." The cemetery fell deathly quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Ellis opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick manila envelope bearing Dad's careful handwriting, to be opened only in the circumstances discussed. Below it, "Lauren is my greatest achievement, my daughter in every way that matters." My eyes stung. Dad had foreseen this. Even in planning his final affairs, he'd been protecting me. Victoria's knuckles whitened on the folder. "This is absurd theater. I have proof." "And so do I, Mr. Ellis replied calmly. He produced a small digital recorder. Thomas was thorough. He left both a written letter and his own recorded testimony addressing exactly these claims. "Mrs. Bennett, would you prefer the letter first? Or shall we hear Thomas explain in his own voice who truly is and isn't his biological child?" Victoria stepped back involuntarily. Brandon's smirk evaporated into confusion as he glanced between his mother and the lawyer. "You're bluffing," Victoria said. But her voice wavered. Mr. Ellis broke the seal with precise movements. The rustle of paper echoed among the headstones. "To my beloved daughter Lauren, and to everyone gathered here today." The words hit me like a wave. 6 months ago, Dad had been alive, laughing at Sunday dinners, calling every week just to hear about my classroom stories. Yet he'd known this day might come. He described our life together after Mom died when I was 7, the bike rides, the Saturday mornings at the stores smelling of sawdust and fresh-cut lumber, him proudly telling customers about his daughter, who dreamed of teaching, how he'd resisted remarrying for 15 years until Victoria arrived, beautiful and polished, with her teenage son Brandon needing stability after a messy divorce. I had tried so hard to welcome them. But the subtle exclusions began immediately, rearranging family photos, suggesting I eat separately while she and Brandon discussed business with Dad, canceling our Saturday rituals for Brandon's needs. Dad saw it all but protected our bond fiercely. Mr. Ellis continued reading Dad's letter in a steady cadence that made it feel like Dad was speaking directly to us from beyond the grave. The cold October air carried every word across the graves. "Yes, I knew about the blood type discrepancy. I've known since Lauren was 8 and needed emergency surgery after a bad fall from her bike. But what Victoria doesn't understand is the full story." The crowd murmured in confusion. My mind flashed back to that terrifying night in the ER, Dad's ashen face as doctors rushed me into surgery, his whispered prayers at my bedside. Mr. Ellis pressed on. 3 years before meeting Victoria, after Sarah's difficult pregnancy with Lauren nearly took her life, I had a vasectomy. Sarah and I decided one child was blessing enough. The procedure was later reversed when Victoria and I tried for children of our own, unsuccessfully. Brandon was already 5 when I met Victoria. Whispers grew louder. Victoria's face drained of color. "I also have definitive DNA evidence, Mr. Ellis continued, holding up documents, "that Brandon is not my biological son. But I raised him as my own because that's what a father does." Victoria's composure cracked. "That's impossible. Thomas never mentioned any vasectomy." "There's more, Mr. Ellis said, lifting the digital recorder. Without waiting, he pressed play. Dad's voice filled the cemetery warm, strong, unmistakably alive. Recorded in his office at the original store surrounded by invoices and family photos. "Hello, everyone. If you're hearing this, Victoria has tried to publicly humiliate my daughter after my death. So let me set the record straight." Gasps erupted again. Brandon looked as if he'd been struck. "Victoria, I know Brandon isn't mine. I've known since you accidentally left your diary open, detailing his real father, your personal trainer, Marcus, whom you continued seeing the first year of our marriage. I know about the yoga sessions that were cover for afternoons together. I know about the payments disguised as training fees on our credit cards. Brandon's face paled dramatically.
Mom.
Is this true? Dad's voice continued, without pause. I had a discreet DNA test run 2 years ago during Brandon's sports physical. 0% probability of paternity. But I loved that boy anyway. Love isn't DNA. I tried to be the father he needed, despite your efforts to undermine me at every turn. Victoria whispered desperately. Turn it off, but the recording played on.
Now.
About Lauren's blood type. Yes. She's AB positive while I am O negative. What you don't know, Victoria, is that Sarah was adopted. Her biological father was a professor named Daniel Whitaker with AB positive blood. Sarah only learned this during her cancer treatments when she needed family medical history. She made me promise never to burden Lauren with it. The adoptive grandparents who raised Sarah were her true parents in every meaningful sense. My legs weakened. Mom, adopted? The loving grandparents I'd known as a child weren't biological, but they had been real family. Sarah wanted Lauren to honor their memory without confusion from strangers. But since you've forced this public spectacle, here's the complete truth. Lauren is absolutely my biological daughter. We had a DNA test during her childhood surgery. 99.99% probability of paternity. Mr. Ellis has the certified original filed with the courts. Mr. Ellis held up the document for all to see. The hospital's seal. Dad's signature dated 23 years prior. Dad's voice softened. I'm leaving a private letter for Lauren explaining her mother's adoption more fully. But Victoria, if you're doing this, know that my will stands unchanged. Lauren inherits the stores and the family home. You receive the lake house and the prenuptial settlement. Yes, I know you tried to destroy your copy. The law firm retained records. Brandon keeps his education fund because he's innocent in your schemes. The recording revealed even more damning evidence. Security footage Victoria thought she deleted, where she told Marcus on the phone that she'd ensure the biological daughter gets nothing after the old fool is gone. Dad had backed up copies everywhere, including with the district attorney in case of foul play. I forgive you, Victoria, Dad's voice concluded gently. For the affairs, the lies, the manipulations. I stayed for the vows I made and for Brandon, hoping you'd change, hoping you'd learn real love. Mostly for him. Lauren, my light, if you're hearing this, you were my greatest joy from the moment you were born. Not because of blood, but because I chose you every single day. The stores are yours because you understand what Bennett truly means. Hard work, integrity,
Community.
love that boy if you can, he's lost. But there's good in him. Your dad. The recording clicked off. Silence blanketed the cemetery. Victoria stumbled away before the casket lowered, heels sinking into mud as she fled toward her luxury SUV. Brandon stood frozen, looking suddenly young and broken, before running after her. The days after the funeral blurred into a haze of paperwork, sympathetic calls, and the overwhelming quiet of the big Victorian house that now felt both too empty and too full of memories. Victoria left town within a week, retreating to her sister's place in Indiana without proper goodbyes or packing, as if Willow Creek had become radioactive. Movers handled the rest later. Brandon, however,
Stayed.
he called me that first Friday night, voice thick with genuine tears I'd never heard from him before. No manipulation, no sarcasm, just raw hurt. Lauren, I swear I didn't know any of it. The affairs, the DNA, Mom's plans, none of it. Somehow, I believed him. Brandon had always been sharp-tongued, competitive, quick to remind everyone he was Dad's only son when Victoria was around. But Dad had seen through the armor, making time for science projects, attending Brandon's games despite the boy's resistance, quietly teaching him about the business when no one else noticed. He was my dad too, wasn't he? Brandon asked, voice cracking. Even knowing the truth, he still showed up.
Called me son.
Tried so hard. Yes, I replied softly. He chose to be your dad every day. That's what made him special. That conversation cracked something open between us. Brandon asked if he could help at the stores, not to claim ownership, but to work, to learn, to honor the man who'd given him more than biology ever could. I started him at the flagship location, the one Grandpa Bennett opened in 1972, doing the same entry-level tasks Dad had assigned me at 16, stocking shelves, learning inventory, facing customers. The employees were wary at first, remembering Brandon's entitled attitude from past visits with Victoria, but his humility won them over. He worked harder than anyone expected, arriving early, staying late, memorizing regulars' names just like Dad had. 6 months later, we shared dinner at the family home, my home now, though it still carried Dad's presence everywhere. Brandon had become a fixture, first guest, then friend, then brother in truth. I found something Mom left behind, he said one evening, sliding an envelope across the table, addressed to him in Dad's handwriting, dated 2 years earlier. Brandon read it aloud, tears flowing freely. Brandon, if you're reading this, you know the truth now. Biology doesn't define family. I'm not your biological father, but I chose you as my son. It wasn't always easy, you pushed back, shaped by circumstances beyond your control. But I saw your potential, the kindness when you thought no one watched, the focus during that science fair project we built together, helping Mrs. Reynolds load lumber even when your friends called. You're not responsible for your mother's choices. You are responsible for who you become. Love isn't blood. It's showing up, staying through difficulty, choosing family daily. I chose you. I hope one day you'll choose us too. Thomas. We cried together at Dad's old kitchen table. 2 adults who'd lost their anchor finally connecting as siblings he'd always prayed we'd become. The stores thrived under new rhythms. I kept every employee, and they warmly embraced both Brandon and me as Thomas Bennett's kids. No qualifiers needed. Brandon now manages the original location with Dad's patience for customers and eye for detail. I still teach 3rd grade. But every Saturday morning I walk the 3 stores like Dad, and I once did. Sometimes with Brandon joining, keeping the legacy alive through stories, sawdust, and community service. Mr. Ellis revealed one final letter from Dad, to be opened on the 1st anniversary. We gathered at the grave. Brandon,
Me?
Aunt Clara, placing fresh yellow roses on the headstone inscribed Thomas Bennett, beloved father. Love makes family. The letter was pure Dad. Protective, honest, full of quiet wisdom. Lauren, if you're reading this with Brandon, Victoria's actions have brought truths to light I hoped to shield you from. Your mother's adoption changes nothing about the love surrounding you. The grandparents who raised Sarah were her real parents because they chose her completely. That's the power of family we build. From the moment I held you, you were mine not by accident of DNA, but by daily choice. Every Saturday at the stores, every homework night, every proud tear at your teaching certification, that was us. I kept Victoria's secrets about Brandon, hoping she'd grow into the mother he deserved. I kept Sarah's story because she asked. But my love for you was never secret. It was infinite. The stores are yours because you understand Bennett means integrity and helping neighbors, not dollar signs. Love Brandon if you can. There's goodness beneath his anger. I've seen it. Your dad. That anniversary visit marked healing. Brandon admitted he'd started therapy to unpack the emotional manipulation, how Victoria had used him as a tool against Dad. She weaponized me, he said quietly. Dad saw it and never stopped trying anyway. He never gave up on either of us, I replied. Natasha, Victoria, never contested the will. The security recordings proved too damning. District attorney involvement loomed if she pushed. We heard little from her afterward. One unsigned birthday card to Brandon with an uncashed check. The hardware stores still smell of possibility, fresh lumber, metal, honest work. But now they carry hope too. Second chances. Chosen bonds stronger than blood. Brandon and I aren't just running a business. We're building the sibling relationship Dad envisioned. One honest conversation and shared Saturday ritual at a time. Dad's true legacy isn't the stores or property. It's the lesson he lived and protected from the grave. Family isn't what you're born into. It's who you choose to love fiercely, protect relentlessly, and stand beside when the world tries to tear you apart. 1 year later, on the second anniversary, Brandon and I returned to the cemetery together. The leaves had turned again, crisp and golden like that fateful October day. We placed more yellow roses, stood in comfortable silence, remembering the man who'd chosen us both. He would have loved seeing us like this, Brandon said softly. No more drama. Just family. Yeah, I agreed.
He would have.
Brandon's therapy continued progressing. He spoke more openly about the abuse, how Victoria's bitterness had poisoned his view of Dad. I was so angry back then, competing for something that was never a competition. Dad loved us both without keeping score. We walked the stores afterward, greeting longtime employees who now treated Brandon like the son he'd become. Customers still asked after Mr. Bennett's kids, smiling at the continuity. I found Dad's final private instructions through Mr. Ellis. Additional guidance for the 5-year mark. When we'd be ready, even in death. He guided us toward growth. The question lingers sometimes in quiet moments. What makes a father? Biology offers a starting point, but love writes the story. Victoria chased money and control, destroying trust in the process. Dad chose presence, forgiveness, and protection, even posthumously. Brandon manages daily operations with quiet competence now, mentoring young employees the way Dad mentored us. I balance teaching with board decisions for the stores, ensuring community programs Dad started, free workshops, scholarship funds, continue thriving. We host family dinners regularly, inviting Aunt Clara and cousins, sharing stories that keep Dad's spirit alive. No more secrets, no more divisions. Just chosen family healing together. Dad's voice echoes in memory. Love makes family. At his grave that first anniversary, with Brandon beside me, I finally understood the depth. The blood-type lie Victoria wielded as a weapon became the catalyst for truth, reconciliation, and a stronger bond than biology alone could forge. Somewhere, I know Dad watches proudly, his kids finally figuring it out, building something beautiful from the foundation of love he laid. The truest family isn't inherited. It's chosen, fought for, and cherished through every storm. The hardware stores of Willow Creek stand as testament, sawdust and steel, hard work and heart. But most importantly, they represent hope that even after betrayal at the graveside, love can rewrite the ending into something enduring.